In the dead of night, behind the humming industrial fridge of a small-town Iowa supermarket, a man vanished without a trace. For a decade, Daniel Carter's disappearance was a whispered mystery, dismissed as a drifter's whim, until 2025, when a renovation crew's discovery of a hidden crawlspace and a shallow grave in the basement unveiled a chilling truth. His wallet, untouched by time, lay beside his bones, pointing to a secret long buried in the shadows of Miller's Market. If you are new to this channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like this video and comment where you are watching from. In the quiet town of Creston, Iowa, where cornfields stretch beyond the horizon and life hums along predictably, Miller's Market stood as a cornerstone of daily routine in 2015. The supermarket, with its flickering fluorescent lights and scuffed linoleum floors, was where locals grabbed their groceries and swapped gossip. Among its night shift workers was Daniel Carter, a 32-year-old stalker with a reserved demeanor and a habit of keeping his head down. His lanky frame and quiet voice made him blend into the background, a man who stocked canned goods and cereal boxes without fanfare. Daniel lived alone in a rented trailer on the edge of town, its peeling paint and sagging porch a reflection of his transient life. His old Chevy pickup, often parked crookedly in the lot, was his only notable possession. Coworkers at Miller's Market knew little about him. He didn't join them for after-work beers or chat about weekend plans. "He's just a loner," they'd say, shrugging off his aloofness. To them, Daniel was a ghost, present but barely noticed, his life a series of quiet shifts under the store's dim lights. On a chilly November night in 2015, Daniel clocked out at 2 a.m., his time card stamped as usual. He left behind a half-finished coffee in the break room, his jacket slung over a chair. No one saw him leave and no one thought much of it when he didn't show up the next night. The manager, Ed Grayson, a gruff man in his 50s who preferred paperwork to people, assumed Daniel had quit. "Kids like him come and go," Ed muttered, tossing Daniel's time card into a drawer. The store's routine churned on, shelves restocked, customers served, life undisturbed. Days turned to weeks. Daniel's trailer sat untouched, his truck gathering dust in the lot. A neighbor, Mrs. Elsie Turner, noticed the lights hadn't flicked on in days and called the police, more out of curiosity than concern. The Creston PD sent a rookie officer to check, who found the trailer empty. No signs of a struggle, just a few clothes and a stack of unopened bills. With no family to raise an alarm, Daniel's disappearance barely registered. Ed filed a missing person report a week later, mostly to cover his bases, but the case landed on a desk and gathered dust. The town moved on, and Daniel Carter faded into Creston's background noise. The supermarket itself was a relic, its brick exterior weathered by decades of Iowa winters. The backroom, where Daniel spent his nights, was a maze of crates and pallets, dominated by a hulking industrial fridge that hummed incessantly. It was a place few lingered, its corners shadowed and damp. Employees whispered about odd noises, creaks, thumps, but chalked them up to the building's age. No one thought to check behind the fridge, where a narrow gap led to a crawlspace unseen and forgotten. Daniel's absence left no ripple, his life as unremarkable in death as it had been in life. Yet, in the quiet of those night shifts, Daniel had carried a secret. He wasn't just a loner, he was a man in love, entangled in a dangerous affair that would unravel only years later. His disappearance, dismissed as a drifter's whim, was no accident. It was a crime, buried deep in the store's shadows, waiting for a decade to be unearthed. August 2025 brought change to Creston. Miller's Market, now owned by a regional chain, was slated for a makeover to compete with the Walmarts and Hy-Vees encroaching on small-town Iowa. The store's dated interior, cracked tiles, flickering lights, was due for an overhaul. A renovation crew arrived, their boots clomping through the backroom as they tackled the first task, moving the ancient industrial fridge that had anchored the space for decades. The fridge, a behemoth of rusted steel, was a nightmare to budge. Its constant hum had been a fixture, drowning out the creaks of the old building. As the crew pried it from the wall, a worker named Javier Ortiz gagged. A sour, lingering odor seeped from the gap, faint but unmistakable. "Something's rotten back here," he said, covering his nose. The crew chief, skeptical but curious, shone a flashlight into the space. Behind the fridge was a narrow panel, loose and unmarked, that opened to a crawlspace dropping to the basement. Javier, a wiry 20-something with a knack for noticing details, volunteered to investigate. Squeezing through the gap, he descended into the basement, a dank, low-ceilinged space cluttered with forgotten crates and cobwebs. His flashlight beam caught a patch of disturbed earth, uneven and dusted with concrete powder. Digging with a borrowed shovel, he uncovered a shallow grave. Bones, brittle and yellowed, lay beside a weathered wallet and a faded Miller's Market ID bearing Daniel Carter's name. The discovery jolted Creston. Police swarmed the store, yellow tape sealing off the back room. Shoppers gawked from the parking lot, their whispers spreading like wildfire. Daniel Carter, the forgotten stalker, was back in the town's consciousness, his bones a grim reminder of a mystery no one had cared to solve. The basement, rarely visited, became a focal point, its dirt floor combed for clues under harsh floodlights. Detective Sarah Monroe, a 15-year veteran of the Creston PD, arrived on scene. At 42, she was known for her sharp instincts and dogged persistence, traits honed by years of untangling small-town secrets. The sight of Daniel's remains, curled in the shallow grave, stirred something in her, a mix of pity and resolve. The wallet, its leather cracked but intact, held a driver's license, a few crumpled dollars and a photo of a younger Daniel, smiling faintly. The ID confirmed he'd been 32 at the time of his disappearance in 2015. Forensics teams descended, their white suits stark against the basement's gloom. Early findings pointed to foul play. A fracture on Daniel's skull suggested a blow, not a fall. The crawlspace, hidden behind the fridge, was a clever hiding spot, accessible only to someone familiar with the store's layout. Sarah's mind churned. Who had access? Who had motive? The store's employee records from 2015 were her starting point, a list of names that might hold the key. Among them was Tom Haskell, the security guard who'd worked nights alongside Daniel. Tom had quit in 2016, citing health issues, and vanished to a cabin outside town. His name sparked murmurs among old-timers at the store, who recalled his gruff demeanor and late-night patrols. Sarah jotted his name at the top of her list, her gut telling her the answer lay in the shadows of those long-ago shifts. The town buzzed with speculation. Was Daniel's death an accident, or had someone buried him deliberately? The fridge, now hauled to a scrapyard, loomed large in Creston's imagination, its hum a ghostly echo of a decade-old crime. Sarah knew the truth was close, buried not just in the dirt but in the lives of those who'd worked beside Daniel, their secrets waiting to crack open. Sarah Monroe stood in the basement of Miller's Market, her boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. The air was thick with the smell of mold and concrete dust, the floodlights casting harsh shadows over Daniel Carter's shallow grave. At 42, Sarah had seen her share of cases in Creston, from petty thefts to bar fights, but a murder hidden for a decade was new territory. Her hazel eyes scanned the scene, noting the precision of the grave's concealment. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act. Someone had planned it. The forensics team worked methodically, bagging soil samples and photographing the remains. The skull fracture, confirmed by the coroner, was no accident, a blunt force blow likely from a heavy object. Sarah's mind raced. The crawlspace behind the fridge was a stroke of genius, accessible only to someone who knew the store's quirks. Miller's Market was a labyrinth of old wiring and forgotten corners, and the basement was rarely used, a dumping ground for broken equipment. Whoever hid Daniel's body had counted on that neglect. Back at the station, Sarah pored over employee records from 2015. Miller's Market had a small crew then: stalkers, cashiers, a janitor, and a security guard named Tom Haskell. His name stood out. Tom had been a fixture, a burly man in his 40s who patrolled the store's quiet hours. Coworkers described him as reliable but short-tempered, especially after a few drinks. His sudden retirement in 2016, a year after Daniel's disappearance, raised Sarah's hackles. Why leave so soon? And why move to a cabin far from town? Sarah drove to the county archives to pull Tom's file. The records painted a picture. Tom Haskell, born and raised in Creston, had worked at Miller's for a decade before quitting. His personnel file noted a few complaints, snapping at employees, showing up hungover, but nothing serious enough to fire him. A 2015 incident report caught her eye, a minor altercation between Tom and Daniel over a scheduling mix-up. It was vague, but Sarah filed it away. She interviewed former employees next. Betty Klein, a cashier now retired, remembered Daniel as sweet but shy. She recalled Tom's dislike for him, muttering about Daniel, thinking he's better than us. Betty's gossip led to another name, Lisa Haskell, Tom's wife, who'd worked the registers in 2015. The couple had split a few years back, and Lisa now lived in a small apartment on the town's east side. Sarah jotted down Lisa's address, sensing a thread to tug. The station buzzed with updates. Forensics found traces of blood in the crawlspace, too degraded for DNA but enough to confirm Daniel died there. The fridge's placement, wedged tight against the wall, had sealed the crawlspace like a tomb. Sarah pictured the scene. A late-night shift, the store empty, someone dragging Daniel's body through that narrow gap. It took strength and nerve, qualities a security guard like Tom might have. Sarah's next stop was the supermarket, now shuttered for the investigation. She walked the back room, its air heavy with dust and memory. The spot where the fridge had stood was a gaping wound, the crawlspace exposed like a secret laid bare. She crouched, peering into the dark, imagining Daniel's final moments. Had he fought? Begged? The silence of the store offered no answers, only echoes of a crime hidden for 10 years. Back at her desk, Sarah mapped out her suspects. Tom was the obvious lead, but she needed more than a hunch. She requested Tom's old phone records, hoping for a digital footprint. The town, meanwhile, was alight with rumors. Old-timers at the diner spun tales of Daniel's shady past, though no one could prove it. Sarah dismissed the noise, focusing on the facts. A body, a hidden grave, and a guard who knew the store's secrets. The puzzle was taking shape, and Tom Haskell was at its center. Tom Haskell's cabin sat on a lonely stretch of gravel road, 10 miles outside Creston. The cedar plank structure was weathered, its windows grimy, surrounded by overgrown pines that blocked the sun. Sarah Monroe pulled up in her unmarked cruiser, her badge tucked in her jacket. At 58, Tom was a shadow of the burly guard he'd been, his face lined, his eyes wary as he opened the door. "Heard you found something at the store," he said, voice gravelly before Sarah could speak. She sat across from him in a cramped living room, the air thick with cigarette smoke. Tom's story came fast, almost rehearsed. He claimed that in November 2015, during a night shift, he'd found Daniel Carter's body behind the fridge, already dead. "Looked like he'd fallen, hit his head," Tom said, rubbing his knuckles. Fearing blame, he admitted to drinking on the job. He panicked, dragged the body to the basement and buried it. "Didn't want the store shut down over my mess," he added, avoiding her gaze. Sarah wasn't buying it. The skull fracture suggested intent, not an accident, and Tom's quick confession felt like a shield for a bigger truth. She pressed him on details. Why not call the police? How did he move the body alone? Tom's answers were vague, his hands fidgeting. "It was dark, I was drunk, I just handled it," he muttered. His story had holes, and Sarah's instincts screamed he was hiding more. She noted the cabin's isolation. No neighbors, no visitors. Tom had cut ties with Creston after quitting Miller's Market in 2016, claiming health issues. Yet his truck, parked outside, was new, its plates from out of state. Sarah filed that away along with his nervous tics. She asked about Daniel, probing for a connection. Tom shrugged, calling him just some kid who worked nights. But his jaw tightened when Sarah mentioned Lisa, his ex-wife. Back at the station, Sarah dug deeper. Tom's phone records from 2015 were a goldmine, but they'd take days to process. She interviewed a former janitor, Carl Watts, who recalled Tom's temper. "He didn't like Daniel," Carl said. "Caught him arguing once, something about schedules." Tom looked ready to swing. The altercation matched the 2015 incident report, adding weight to Tom's potential motive. Sarah returned to the supermarket, walking the back room again. The crawlspace was a tight fit, barely wide enough for a body. Moving Daniel would have taken effort, especially for a man drinking. She pictured Tom, fueled by adrenaline, hauling the body through the dark, his flashlight bouncing off the basement's dirt walls. The grave's concrete dust cover was clever, blending with the floor. Tom knew the store's blind spots, a perk of his security role. The town was restless, rumors swirling at the coffee shop. Some said Daniel owed money, others claimed he'd been mixed up with drugs. Sarah ignored the chatter, focusing on Tom. His story didn't add up. Why bury a body if it was an accident? She requested a search warrant for his cabin, hoping for physical evidence. Meanwhile, Lisa Haskell's name lingered in her notes. As Tom's wife in 2015, she might hold the key to his motive, whether she knew it or not. Sarah's mind churned as she drove back to the station. Tom's confession was too convenient, a half-truth to dodge a murder charge. The phone records when they arrived might reveal more. For now, she had a suspect, a crime scene, and a decade-old secret starting to crack. The truth was close, and Sarah was determined to drag it into the light. Lisa Haskell's apartment was a small, tidy unit above a hardware store in Creston's east side. The 38-year-old woman who answered Sarah Monroe's knock had tired eyes and a cautious smile, her blonde hair pulled into a loose bun. Lisa, once a cashier at Miller's Market, now worked at a daycare, her life a quiet attempt to move past a broken marriage. When Sarah mentioned Daniel Carter, Lisa's face crumpled, and she invited the detective inside. Over coffee at a wobbly kitchen table, Lisa shared her story. In 2015, she and Daniel had been lovers, their affair a secret born in the monotony of night shifts. Daniel, despite his quiet nature, had a warmth that drew her in, his shy smiles a contrast to Tom's growing distance. "He made me feel seen," Lisa said, her voice catching. She showed Sarah a silver locket, engraved with DNL, a gift from Daniel. When he vanished, she thought he'd left her, his silence a wound she carried for years. Sarah listened, noting Lisa's genuine grief. The affair gave Tom a motive, but Lisa's story raised questions. Had she known more than she let on? Lisa swore she hadn't suspected foul play, believing Daniel had fled Creston to escape his dead-end life. Yet she recalled Tom's odd behavior that November, coming home late, his clothes streaked with dirt, claiming he'd fixed a pipe at the store. Sarah pressed gently, asking about Tom's temper. Lisa admitted he'd grown jealous, checking her phone, but she never thought he'd kill. The locket was a breakthrough. Sarah bagged it as evidence, noting its potential for DNA. If Daniel's touch lingered, it could tie him to Lisa and, by extension, to Tom's motive. Lisa's story painted a picture of a marriage fraying under Tom's paranoia, his security guard shifts leaving him isolated and bitter. Sarah wondered if Daniel's plan to confront Tom had sparked the violence, a theory she'd test with the phone records. Back at the station, Sarah cross-referenced Lisa's account with employee interviews. A former stalker, Maria Gomez, recalled Lisa and Daniel's chemistry, stolen glances in the break room, hushed talks by the loading dock. Maria had suspected an affair but kept quiet, fearing Tom's wrath. "He had a mean streak," Maria said. "Didn't like anyone crossing him." The pieces were aligning: a jealous husband, a secret lover, and a hidden body. Sarah visited the supermarket again, imagining the affair unfolding in its shadowed corners. The back room, with its stacks of crates, was a perfect place for whispered promises. The fridge, looming like a sentinel, hid the crawlspace where Daniel's body had lain. Sarah pictured Lisa, young and hopeful, slipping the locket around her neck, unaware her lover was dead, buried by the man she slept beside. The town's gossip mill churned, with some blaming Lisa for stirring trouble. Sarah dismissed the noise, focusing on evidence. The phone records were due soon, potentially revealing Daniel's final messages. For now, Lisa's locket and her story were enough to keep Tom in the crosshairs. Sarah felt the case tightening, the affair a spark that had ignited a murder, its embers buried for a decade but now glowing with truth. November 2015. The air in Creston was crisp, the supermarket's backroom a cocoon of shadows and humming machinery. Daniel Carter, restless and in love, typed a text to Lisa Haskell on his break. "I'm telling him tonight. We can be together." His heart raced with the weight of it. For months, their affair had been a secret, stolen moments in the store's quiet corners. But Daniel was done hiding, tired of Lisa's strained marriage to Tom, the security guard whose temper loomed over their nights. Tom, working the same shift, had grown suspicious. Lisa's late-night texts, her distracted smiles, hadn't gone unnoticed. That evening, he'd swiped her phone from her purse in the break room, his gut churning as he read Daniel's message. The words were a gut punch, confirmation of his fears. Tom, 43 and hardened by years of patrolling empty aisles, felt his world tilt. Lisa was slipping away and Daniel was the cause. Tom waited, his patrol route a pretense as he lingered near the back room. Around 1 a.m., with the store silent, he called Daniel over, his voice calm but edged. "Got a security issue by the fridge?" he lied, leading Daniel to the cluttered space. The fridge's hum masked their steps, its bulk casting shadows. Daniel, expecting a talk, followed, unaware of the crowbar Tom had grabbed from a nearby shelf, its cold weight steady in his hand. The confrontation was swift. "You think you can take her from me?" Tom spat, his voice low. Daniel, caught off guard, tried to explain, his words about love and honesty cut short. Tom's rage erupted, the crowbar swinging in a brutal arc. It caught Daniel's temple, a sickening crack echoing in the dark. He crumpled, blood pooling on the concrete. Tom stood frozen, the crowbar slipping from his grip, his breath ragged. Reality hit hard. Tom, no stranger to the store's layout, knew the crawlspace behind the fridge, a maintenance quirk he'd discovered years ago. He dragged Daniel's body, still warm, through the narrow gap, his muscles straining under the weight. The basement below was a forgotten space, perfect for hiding his sin. Tom's mind raced, his drunken haze sharpening into survival mode. He had to act fast before the morning crew arrived. The act was methodical, almost mechanical. Tom grabbed a shovel from the maintenance closet, its blade worn from years of odd jobs. In the basement he dug, the dirt yielding under his frantic swings. Daniel's body, rolled into the shallow grave, was covered with earth and dusted with concrete powder from a nearby bag, blending seamlessly with the floor. Tom wiped the crowbar clean, returning it to the shelf, and checked the store's grainy cameras. None caught the backroom. As he left, the store was silent, its secret sealed. Tom drove home, dirt under his nails, his story about a late-night fix ready for Lisa. The night had changed him, his anger replaced by a cold determination to keep his crime buried. Daniel Carter was gone, and Tom would ensure he stayed that way, hidden in the shadows of Miller's Market. Tom Haskell drove home in the pre-dawn hours of November 2015, his hands gripping the wheel to steady their tremble. The crowbar's weight lingered in his palms, though he'd scrubbed it clean and returned it to the shelf. Miller's Market was silent behind him, the fridge back in place, its hum a grim lullaby over Daniel Carter's hidden grave. Tom's mind churned with what he'd done: murder, concealment, a secret now buried in the basement's dirt. At home, Lisa was asleep, unaware of the blood on her husband's hands. Tom stripped off his dirt-streaked uniform, tossing it into the washer with a double dose of detergent. He rehearsed his story: a pipe had burst at the store, he'd stayed late to fix it. Lisa, used to his late nights, wouldn't question it. But as he stood under the shower, the water couldn't wash away the image of Daniel's crumpled body, his eyes vacant in the flashlight's beam. The crawlspace had been Tom's salvation. He'd found it years ago during a routine patrol, a quirk of the store's 1960s construction. Barely wide enough for a man, it dropped to the basement, a space no one bothered with. Dragging Daniel's body through had been grueling. Tom's back ached, his breath short from the effort. In the basement he'd worked fast, the shovel biting into the earth. The concrete dust, a trick he'd learned from patching floors, hid the grave's outline, making it just another patch of floor. Tom's security role gave him an edge. He knew the store's cameras were outdated, their grainy footage rarely checked unless a theft occurred. The backroom was a blind spot, too cluttered for clear shots. He'd moved the fridge back alone, its casters squeaking, ensuring the crawlspace was hidden. By 3 a.m., the store looked untouched, Daniel's coffee cup the only trace of his final shift. The next day Tom played his part. When Daniel didn't show, he shrugged alongside the others, muttering about flaky kids. Ed Grayson, the manager, grumbled but didn't push. Tom kept his patrol steady, his face a mask of routine. Inside, fear gnawed. Would someone notice the fridge's odd angle? Would the basement's dirt shift? But days passed, then weeks, and no one looked. Lisa's grief was the hardest part. She grew quiet, her eyes red from crying, believing Daniel had left her. Tom, torn between guilt and relief, distanced himself, his temper sharper. He drank more, his nights spent replaying the murder. The crowbar, back on its shelf, haunted him, a silent witness to his crime. Yet the store's rhythm, stockers, cashiers, customers, carried on, oblivious. By 2016 the weight was too much. Tom quit, claiming a bad back, and moved to his cabin, putting distance between himself and Miller's Market. The town forgot Daniel, his trailer cleared, his truck towed. Tom's secret held, buried deep, but the locket Lisa wore, a gift from Daniel, kept the past alive, a ticking bomb he couldn't escape. For a decade, Miller's Market stood unchanged, its fridge humming, its crawlspace sealed. Creston moved on, new faces filling the store's aisles, old ones fading. Daniel Carter's disappearance became a footnote, a story told over beers at the local bar. That kid who ditched his job. The basement, untouched, held its secret, the shallow grave blending with the dirt floor, dusted with concrete powder. Tom Haskell retreated to his cabin, a self-imposed exile. At 43 in 2015 he'd been a man of routine, his security guard shifts a tether to normalcy. By 2016 he was unraveling. Lisa noticed his distance, his late-night drinking, but chalked it up to stress. Their marriage, already strained, crumbled further. Tom's temper flared at small things, a spilled coffee, a wrong glance, his guilt a constant shadow. Lisa moved out in 2018, leaving him alone with his ghosts. Lisa, meanwhile, rebuilt her life. She took a job at a daycare, her warmth a hit with the kids. But she carried Daniel's locket, its D&L engraving a private ache. She'd loved him fiercely, his quiet kindness a balm to her unhappy marriage. His disappearance had shattered her, leaving her to wonder why he'd left without a word. She never suspected Tom, his pipe-fix story from that night buried in her memory. Miller's Market changed hands in 2020, bought by a chain looking to modernize. The fridge stayed too heavy to move, its hum a constant. Employees came and went, none lingering in the basement. The crawlspace hidden behind the fridge was forgotten, a relic of the store's past. Creston's gossip shifted to new scandals. A mayor's affair, a factory closing, Daniel's name rarely mentioned. Tom's cabin became his fortress. He avoided town, his truck making rare trips for supplies. Neighbors noticed his isolation, his once steady frame thinning, his eyes hollow. He'd sit on his porch, a bottle in hand, staring at the pines. The murder replayed in his mind, the crowbar's swing, Daniel's fall, the dirt piling over his body. He told himself it was done, buried, but the locket Lisa wore gnawed at him, a link to the truth he couldn't sever. In Creston, life ticked on. The supermarket's backroom, with its crates and flickering lights, remained a place of work, not suspicion. The fridge, a silent sentinel, hid its secret well. No one questioned the faint creaks or the basement's musty air. Daniel's trailer was razed, his truck scrapped, his life erased. Yet the locket, tucked against Lisa's skin, kept his memory alive, a spark waiting to ignite. By 2025, Tom was a ghost himself, known only to those who remembered the old guard. Lisa, hardened by years of loss, wore the locket less but kept it close. The store, slated for renovation, stood on the cusp of change. The grave, undisturbed for a decade, waited in the dark, its truth ready to surface with the first tug of the fridge. August 2025. Sarah Monroe sat at her desk, the Creston PD's fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The case of Daniel Carter's murder was unraveling, but Tom Haskell's confession felt like a half-truth. He'd admitted to burying Daniel's body, claiming it was a panicked cover-up of an accidental death. Yet the skull fracture screamed intent, and Sarah's instincts told her Tom was dodging the full story. The phone records arrived, a stack of digital logs from 2015. Sarah's team sifted through them, finding a deleted text from Daniel to Lisa. "I'm telling him tonight. We can be together." Sent hours before Daniel's last shift, it pointed to a confrontation. Sarah re-interviewed Tom, showing him the text. His face paled, his story faltering. "I didn't see that," he stammered, claiming he'd found Daniel already dead. But his eyes darted, betraying his lie. Forensics added pressure. Blood traces in the crawlspace, though degraded, matched the basement soil, confirming Daniel died there. The concrete dust on the grave was a clever touch, but not clever enough. Microscopic blood specks lingered, tying Tom to the scene. Sarah pictured him, frantic, dusting the grave to hide his work. His security role gave him access, opportunity, and knowledge of the store's blind spots. Sarah returned to Miller's Market, walking the back room. The fridge was gone, scrapped, but its former spot was a scar. The crawlspace, now exposed, was a tight squeeze, its walls scuffed from Daniel's body being dragged through. Sarah imagined Tom, fueled by rage, hauling his rival to the basement. The shovel, still in the maintenance closet, was being tested for prints, though years of use might have erased them. The town was abuzz, the discovery fueling headlines in the Creston News Advertiser. Locals speculated wildly, Daniel was a drug runner, a thief, a victim of a random attack. Sarah ignored the noise, focusing on Tom. She interviewed more former employees like Pete Larson, a stalker who recalled Tom's dislike for Daniel. "He'd glare at him like he was sizing him up," Pete said. The 2015 altercation report resurfaced, a vague note about a scheduling dispute that now felt ominous. Lisa Haskell's name kept circling back. Sarah met her again, probing for more. Lisa's grief was raw, her locket a tangible link to Daniel. She admitted Tom had grown paranoid, checking her phone, but she'd never connected it to Daniel's death. Sarah showed her the text, and Lisa's eyes widened. "He was going to tell Tom?" she whispered, realizing the danger Daniel had faced. Her memory of Tom's dirt-streaked clothes that night took on new weight. Sarah requested a warrant for Tom's cabin, hoping for physical evidence. A crowbar, clothes, anything. The locket, sent to the lab, was a priority. Daniel's DNA could solidify the affair as motive. The case was tightening, Tom's story cracking under the weight of evidence. Sarah felt the truth closing in, a decade-old murder finally coming to light in Creston's quiet heart. Lisa Haskell sat in her apartment, the locket clutched in her hand as Sarah Monroe laid out the evidence. The text from Daniel, "I'm telling him tonight," had shattered her. For 10 years she'd believed Daniel abandoned her, his silence a betrayal. Now the truth was uglier, Her husband, Tom, had killed him, burying her lover in the basement of Miller's Market. Lisa's world, already fragile, collapsed. Sarah watched her closely, balancing empathy with scrutiny. Lisa's grief seemed genuine, but Sarah needed to rule out complicity. Lisa recounted 2015. Her marriage to Tom was crumbling, his drinking and paranoia a constant strain. Daniel, with his quiet charm, had been a lifeline. Their affair, conducted in stolen moments at the store, was reckless but real. The locket, a cheap silver piece from a pawn shop, was Daniel's promise of a future. Lisa's memory of that November night was vivid now. Tom had come home at 4 a.m., his boots caked with dirt, his shirt damp with sweat. "Pipe burst at work," he'd said, avoiding her eyes. She'd believed him, too tired to question. Days later, when Daniel didn't call, she assumed he'd left her, his trailer empty, his truck abandoned. She'd cried for weeks, the locket her only comfort, unaware it was a clue to murder. Sarah probed gently. Had Lisa suspected Tom? "He was jealous," Lisa admitted, "but I never thought he'd kill." She recalled Tom checking her phone, his temper flaring at small things. The text Daniel sent had been on her phone, one Tom could have seen. Sarah showed her the forensic report. Blood in the crawlspace, the concrete-dusted grave. Lisa's face drained, her hands trembling as she handed over the locket for DNA testing. Back at the station, Sarah pieced it together. The affair was the spark. Daniel's plan to confront Tom had pushed him over the edge. The crowbar, likely the murder weapon, was still being tested, its surface too worn for clear prints. But the locket was key. If Daniel's DNA was on it, it tied him to Lisa and gave Tom a motive. Sarah imagined Lisa, young and in love, unaware her husband had killed to keep her. Creston's rumor mill churned. Some called Lisa a homewrecker, others pitted her. Sarah shut out the noise, focusing on Lisa's story. She recalled Tom's late-night return, the dirt, the lie about the pipe. It matched the timeline of Daniel's death. Lisa agreed to testify, her guilt over Daniel's fate outweighing her fear of Tom. "I should have known," she whispered, her voice breaking. Sarah left Lisa's apartment, the locket bagged as evidence. The case was solidifying, Tom's confession unraveling against the weight of texts, blood, and Lisa's testimony. The supermarket, now a ghost town, held the echoes of that night, its secrets spilling out. Lisa's heartbreak was the heart of it, a love story turned deadly, its truth buried for a decade but now rising to the surface. Tom Haskell sat in the Creston PD's interrogation room, his hands cuffed, his face a mask of defeat. Sarah Monroe faced him, the phone records and forensic reports spread on the table. The text from Daniel, "I'm telling him tonight," was the final nail. Tom's story of finding Daniel dead had collapsed, and Sarah's steady gaze told him she knew it. "Tell me what really happened," she said, her voice calm but firm. Tom's confession came in halting bursts. He admitted to seeing Daniel's text on Lisa's phone, the words igniting years of resentment. His marriage was failing, Lisa's distance a daily wound. Daniel, young and hopeful, was stealing her away. That night, Tom lured him to the back room, the crowbar already in hand. "I didn't plan to kill him," Tom said, his voice low. "But he started talking about her, about leaving me." I snapped. The blow was swift, the crowbar's weight doing the rest. Tom described dragging Daniel's body through the crawlspace, his heart pounding as he worked in the dark. The basement grave, dusted with concrete, was his desperate bid to erase the crime. He'd cleaned the crowbar, checked the cameras, and gone home to Lisa, lying about a pipe. For years he lived with it, the guilt eating him as Lisa mourned her lover. Sarah listened, noting every detail. Tom's story matched the evidence, the blood, the grave, the text. The locket's DNA results were pending, but Lisa's testimony sealed Tom's motive. He'd killed to keep her, only to lose her anyway. Sarah pressed for more. Had anyone helped? Tom shook his head, insisting he acted alone, his voice hollow with resignation. The arrest made headlines. Creston reeled, the supermarket's dark secret dominating talk at the diner. Some saw Tom as a monster, others a man broken by betrayal. Sarah stayed focused, ensuring the case was airtight. The crowbar, though printless, was confirmed as the likely weapon, its size matching the skull fracture. The basement's blood traces, though faint, corroborated Tom's confession. Lisa's role was clarified. She was a witness, not a suspect, her heartbreak a key to the truth. The town's sympathy shifted, her grief softening their judgment. Sarah visited the supermarket one last time, its empty aisles a reminder of the crime's long shadow. Tom's confession closed the case, but its echoes lingered, a decade of silence broken by a single discovery. Tom Haskell's conviction came swiftly, a life sentence without parole. The Creston courtroom was packed, locals craning to see the man who'd hidden a murder for a decade. Sarah Monroe watched from the back, her notepad closed, the case resolved but heavy. Tom's confession, backed by texts, blood evidence, and Lisa's testimony, left no doubt. The locket, with Daniel's DNA confirmed, was the final piece, a symbol of love turned deadly. Lisa left Creston days after the trial, her bags packed, the locket tucked away. She couldn't face the town's pity or its whispers. Her new life, wherever it led, would carry Daniel's memory, now tinged with guilt for sparking his death. Miller's Market closed for good, its reputation toxic. The fridge was gone, the crawlspace sealed, but the building stood as a grim monument to the crime. Sarah walked the town's quiet streets, reflecting on the case. Daniel's death, so easily dismissed in 2015, had nearly stayed buried. The fridge, the crawlspace, Tom's cunning, it was a perfect crime undone by chance. Creston would move on, but the story would linger, told in hushed tones at the diner, a cautionary tale of secrets and betrayal. The grave, now empty, held no more answers. Daniel's bones were laid to rest properly, a small service attended by Lisa and a few old co-workers. Sarah stood at the cemetery's edge, watching the wind stir the grass. The locket, returned to Lisa, was a bittersweet relic, its DNA, a reminder of a love that cost everything. The case was closed, but its shadows remained, etched into Creston's heart.